Welcome back to a new episode of Podcast on the Brink. It's Friday, May 23rd. A big sports weekend coming up in the state of Indiana. No better man to help us talk about that and also some Indiana basketball talk. Scott Caulfield of CrimsonCast is back on this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink. Before we get to Scott, wanted to take a quick moment, remind you that this episode of Podcast on the Brink brought to you by our friends at Visit Bloomington. Just because basketball season is over doesn't mean the fun stops. Spring is the perfect time to explore everything Bloomington has to offer. Hike the trails at Griffey Lake Nature Preserve, then refuel with local flavors on tap at Upland Brewing Company. And don't forget about the many music festivals coming to Bloomington this spring. Whether you're into outdoor adventures, food, or just relaxing in a vibrant college town, Visit Bloomington's got you covered. Start planning your spring getaway now at visitbloomington.com. Scott, this weekend, Bloomington's not really the place to be. It's Indianapolis. We've got, I believe I saw the 500, what gets underway Sunday afternoon, 12:45, I believe.
12:45. Great. First off, Alex, great to talk to you. Happy to be on. 12:45 green flag. I mean, but the great thing is you can be in Bloomington because the race is now, the blackout is lifted. If you're in Bloomington, you can watch it on Fox. Go to Lake Lemon or Lake Monroe. Go hang out a little bit, and then go check out the Pacers that night, and you're good to go.
Let me ask you something about the blackout, because I've always, someone that doesn't live up there, not really been affected by that. How big of a deal is that change, and what do you know about why that finally was lifted?
Well, it was lifted this year because they sold all the grandstand seats. I mean, you could do an entire podcast on this, and I know a lot of it, but it goes back to the race was always on radio. And it's up to kind of IMS to say when they've sold all of the seats, and that whether they also count infield seats or not is up for debate. And what I've always heard is that it was partially the TV broadcast partners at the time was ABC for years. And then the IMS would sell the radio rights, and they sold them under the idea of hey, you're never going to be on TV. So the radio rights are worth a lot more than they should be in the Indianapolis market. And then in 2016, the 100th running of the race, they sold out the entire thing and they lifted the blackout. Because there was even questions if IMS would ever even say if they ever sold everything. Because it's, Kurt Cavanagh, the Indy star, this is, 10, 15 years ago, actually drove around the track and counted all the seats. Because that's the only real indication we have. IMS doesn't really publish, Assembly Hall is 17,571 or whatever. Right. IMS doesn't even publish what the full seating capacity of IMS is. It's always approximately this. So it's kind of up to their discretion. So the short answer is they sold all the seats, and that's contractually how they do it. I do wonder, it's a first year the race is going to be on Fox, and you're getting to a point where the race was on NBC. It used to be on Peacock. They started to do geofencing, but people can use VPNs to get around it. I do wonder if they've just kind of been look, we need to get our arms around this thing. It's not going to change. And this is going to help give Fox a real boost in numbers, because what's silly about it made sense 15, 20 years ago, but nobody wants to listen to it on the radio. Maybe guys in the 70s and 80s do. I don't. People want to go to the race, but you're going to get a huge TV number because most of your race fans are in the Indianapolis area. The last thing I'll say that IMS has done a good job on this. I'm sure people are can we just skip, put a timestamp, talk IU basketball, stop talking racing. The thing that IMS has done and Penske, and they've done a really good job is it's a phenomenal in-person event. I mean, that is, even though I can watch it on TV, I want to go in person because I want to see the flyover. I want to hear taps. I want to be there for the start of the race. You cannot replicate that on TV. And they've done a really good job of kind of sprucing it up, making it an even bigger in-person event. And I think they're starting to understand, look, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can get the big TV number, and it's not going to draw away because we built this as a phenomenal in-person live event. And the TV broadcast really only accentuates, damn, that is cool. I want to be there.
Yeah. So you're doing both, right? So you're doing the 500, and then you're doing game 2 of the Pacers next, which that series now has, just based on how game one played out, and obviously by the time some people listen to this, game two will have already happened because it's
Right.
going to happen Friday night. But I just think the juice for that series has gone up to another level based on what we saw the other night.
Yeah, so I will be doing the double. I've been going to the 500. I started going with my dad. I mean, everyone has a story. Like 85, I started going with my dad. We went for 12 years together. When I moved back to Indianapolis in 09, my wife and I started going. So I'm pushing 28, 29 races now, but we've been going every year since 09. I've had Pacers tickets for the last 10 or 12 years. I didn't have them in 13, I think was the last time they had a double. So this time I was kind of debating, but my son loves going to games. He was like a little salty. He's not going to the 500. So yeah, it's going to be a long day. A lot of espresso shots, a lot of coffee, but everyone has their own way of doing it. Like I know how to get in and out of the track and get home. So my plan is I'm actually going to drive from IMS to Westfield, come home, take a quick shower, grab my son, and then go back down. And in a weird way, that actually might be better than me trying to just get across town, even though it's only 3 or 4 miles from the track to Gamebridge. That traffic is going to be wild. I don't know what the pattern is going to be. So it should be fun. But yeah, the Pacers Knicks series, that game one went to another level. It's game three is going to be electric because you're either looking at a 1-1 series or you're looking at, the Pacers possibly trying to go 3-0 and just close the Knicks out. It'll be great. But the Pacers have been on an absolute heater. They've had a great playoff run, but they've been fun to watch all year. I mean, this is such a fun team to watch. They move the basketball around. They're really playing different than a lot of other people in the NBA. They've built their team differently. And you're seeing Halliburton was already a good player, but he's starting. It's so weird. I've been Galen, my co-host. We've been talking a lot about this off air. Just start calling each other and talking Pacers stuff. There's a lot of similarities between the 90s and this team with the Pacers. And the 90s, you had a Pacers team that didn't play the same style that the NBA at large media didn't quite know how to handle them. And you had Reggie Miller, who was just a very singularly different and unique star who wasn't the prototypical get you 28 every single night. He was much more of a high and low, but could come in the moment. And in a weird way, I mean, they're different, but they're also similar in that Halliburton is kind of getting into that same mold where he's not the prototypical, I'm going to get you 28 and 12 every night. But damn, man, when the lights are bright, he wants the stage and he's showing he can handle it. And that's something that really resonates with Indiana fans who grew up with Reggie Miller.
Yeah, I know not everyone that listens to this podcast is an NBA person, and sometimes I feel like college basketball fans will talk about the NBA in a negative light. There's no defense played and all these different things that just simply really aren't true. But
Right.
If you haven't had a chance to watch this Pacers team, definitely this series, if you enjoy good basketball, and the Knicks are, for a long time I remember growing up just despising the Knicks, not liking the Knicks. This Knicks team is actually pretty likable. They've got a lot of guys on there that are easy to root for and watch. Obviously, Pacers fans don't want to hear that, but I mean, guys like Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, I mean, those guys are a lot of fun to watch. So I just think it's a terrific series for basketball, and what a great day Sunday is going to be in the state of Indiana, Indianapolis. So looking forward to that. We're obviously here to talk IU basketball.
It's an IU matchup. You have OG versus Thomas Bryant, who both been playing. I mean, OG's obviously playing a lot of minutes, but Thomas Bryant's getting some important minutes with the Pacers. He's been
nice little comeback for Thomas too, after kind of being buried on the bench there on Denver's roster a couple of years ago when they won the title, and then kind of working his way back up, getting traded from Miami up to Indianapolis. And they obviously had a need for him, and he's done a great job, I think, in the limited minutes that he's gotten. And yeah, you're right. It's a fun series. Glad to see at least one of those guys going to go to the finals. So
right, exactly.
From an IU perspective, you win either way. But with IU basketball, I was talking before we hit record. It was weird. It was either the day of or the day before Woodson's announcement, whatever you want to call it, came out that we had you on the podcast. So a lot's changed since then, and one reason I just wanted to have you on is because you and Galen have done CrimsonCast for so long, and I love the podcast and I love hearing your opinions. And for those that don't listen to CrimsonCast, you should make that a regular part of your podcast rotation. But Scott, it's been a little over 2 months since DeVries was hired, more than 3 months since you've been on this show. I'm just curious, like from your perspective, because you look at this through a little bit of a different lens than I do, more from a fan perspective. What are your just general thoughts on how maybe briefly how the Woodson era ended, and now where this program is a couple months into DeVries' tenure.
So we'll start with the end of the Woodson era. It didn't go well.
Yeah.
Didn't go well, Alex. I tried to be optimistic. As I'm getting older, I try really hard with these coaching changes, which unfortunately are happening a little bit too frequently. I try and go into each one and be positive, because whether I like it or not, like, this is going to be the coach of my college basketball team. So let's at least go into it with a positive attitude. And so I went into the Woodson thing. I was a little bit perplexed, because like that was an interesting hire. Like, that didn't seem like, but okay, we finally did it. We finally we hired a former player, we hired somebody in the family, we hired an NBA guy, and then you could start to be like, all right, well, this guy knows basketball and all of these things. And then he was able to get Trace Jackson Davis to stay. He got Jalen Hood-Schifino. He got a really good team there in his second year. He had some nice success against Purdue and Painter. So it's not all bad, but a lot of the things that were concerning about bringing an NBA guy into college, you saw pop up over and over and over again. And this isn't just a Woodson thing. It's just, you've seen it across college basketball. NBA only coaches have a really hard time. Like, Pitino and Calipari are not fair comps, because they're college guys who just are NBA guys coming to college, like an Avery Johnson, also in his alma mater, don't normally work well. And it's because, sometimes I think NBA guys have a lower view of what college is. And, going to a lot of Pacers games, it's interesting watching Rick Carlisle coach, because you haven't been to a lot of NBA games. Like, they'll call a timeout. They'll have 3.5 minutes in the timeout. Carlisle will go to, and this is all NBA teams do this. He'll go talk to his assistants for like 2.5 minutes. And it's like, it's not a timeout. Like, he's just talking to his assistants. They're going through stuff. He'll go into the huddle for like 18 to 20 seconds, and then the team will break and be done, because you realize, and again, I'm not in the huddle, but he's not going to, Halliburton or Aaron Nesmith saying, hey man, you got to make sure, keep the ball down on the drive. And like it's real. Like, hey man, don't forget, Brunson likes to go left when he's getting slip screen. Like, it is specific things, and everything else is like, you figure it out. And you realize, like, that doesn't work in college, because college kids need to be told the things like, hey man, don't forget, you can't run on the inbounds, and like, we only have 4 seconds. So you've got to make it a little more granular. So I think those were concerns that led up. But Alex, the thing that, and I'm just going to be frank here and maybe annoy people a little bit, the thing that really bothered me, as I now reflect more on the Woodson era, is part of the reason you bring a former player back into the, somebody from the family, is that they theoretically should understand Indiana basketball. They should understand what it means. They should understand how, important the fans are, the students, Assembly Hall, Candy Stripe, all the stuff that we talk ad nauseum about should matter to them. And by the end, it felt like it didn't matter. Like, that's the part that is wild to me, is if Woodson hadn't have played, we'd all be like, man, this guy just doesn't understand Indiana basketball. You can't talk about other teams this way. You can't not go to the Indiana State title game. You can't treat Indiana high school coach like this. You can't basically give the Heisman, tell Fish, I'm not doing your interviews. Like, that's the thing that really pissed me off, if I have to be honest. Like, when he, after our podcast, he got announced that he was stepping down, and then he just stopped doing media availability. Stopped doing it. Don Fisher. It's not like Don Fisher.
He hadn't been doing media availability most of the season, because I kept track of it. There was, after Atlantis happened, he did media availability, I think, after 1 or 2 before he did after games, but before games he did 1 or 2 the entire rest of the season after Atlantis.
Right.
So,
yeah, and you do that. I mean, I would say this all the time. Like, imagine if Ballo just stopped. Like, if a player did that, which, like, I'm not doing interviews anymore, we'd be up our grills about this with NIL and like, what are these kids turning into? This is a professional who should understand what it is. And again, it's not like Fish is going to ask you hard questions. So to me, that was really disappointing, because it felt like, and then you hear all of the, the rumors and stories about, missed recruiting visits, and just, being the things that were being said that seemed very arrogant about how he handled the job. And it just was like, man, does this guy understand how important this program is? And I'm sure he does. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't, but it's just his actions didn't meet what I was expecting from the start of what I would get from a former player coming in. And to me, that along with not making the tournament and the losses, that's the most disappointing part. Is it's like, damn, I could have been okay losing if it felt like this guy really cared as much as the fans do. But all I can say is it didn't feel that way. And if he did feel as much for the university, he did a really poor job of showing it in his actions.
So the DeVries era, that was kind of the second part of my question. What are your early thoughts on just everything that's happened? Obviously, you don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of trying to break down 10 players and what the roster is going to look like, because we've done that, and also it's easy to kind of project what this team's actually going to be until we actually see some games next season. It's really hard to know what to expect, but I'm just kind of curious, watching from your vantage point, what you've thought of the approach so far, and maybe some general thoughts on what they've been able to assemble.
Yeah. It's funny. Me and some buddies during the Woodson cycle, we did a bet. We did like a snake draft of who we thought the coach would be. And we went through 5 rounds and nobody picked Woodson. And we were like, that's looking back, that's curious. So this time, of course, we ran it back. The joke, I have a couple of friends who are also not IU fans who kind of do it to troll me. And so they were like, we should make this a keeper league because you're going to do it every 4 years. I'm like, all right, fine. So we did a keeper league this year. We went 5 rounds again and nobody picked DeVries this time. So hopefully it's not a similar result. I was surprised in that it was just a name. Galen and I were doing kind of 4 coach deep dives on our podcast every week because we knew, it was like February when we got the announcement. We knew we'd have a ton of time, just kind of take our time. We never got to DeVries, which may have been a good thing that we don't have on tape our thoughts ahead of time. So I was initially, I think like everybody else, just, there's a part of you, it's like, man, I want the name. Like I want the name that I've heard of, that it's like, wow, it's a big splashy hire. But if you look through college basketball, a lot of the programs that are doing well, they don't have those big splashy hires. It's really assistants who move up, like, Todd Golden with Florida. It's like that didn't blow the doors off. That wasn't a name anybody had heard of. Nate Oates with Alabama. Those aren't names that at the time you're like, oh my God, that's huge. So I was, but very slowly I've come to be very intrigued and cautiously optimistic with the hire. And I was telling you before we started, like, I'm just cautiously optimistic because I've just been through this too many times where Archie seemed like it was going to work and it didn't. I probably talked myself into Woodson. That obviously didn't work. At certain points in the Crean era, I was like, this is the right guy. This is the one who's going to take us there. And then it kind of went sideways very quickly. So my guard is up. It's a joke I use in other facets of life too. It's like, it's not your fault. It's like previous girlfriends have burned me. It's not your fault. And I'm happily married for 25 years, no other girlfriends. But it's like, I would tell it to DeVries, like, it's nothing he's done. It's just I've been burned enough being so optimistic that I'm cautiously optimistic. But thus far, everything he's done, what I like about it is it seems to be with a plan. It seems to be with purpose. And he's doing little things that kind of, throw catnip to IU fans. The transfer we got who's looking at Kentucky, and then he goes on
Lamar Wilkerson.
Thank you, Wilkerson. He goes on the field of 68 and he's like, oh yeah, DeVries just got in the plane and came here the next day and signed me. And it's like, yes, like give me way more of that. Like, and he's talking to high school coaches, and I've done some work with Fair Shake Radio down in Southern Indiana. They do a lot like high school basketball. They are saying, there's starting to be some inroads with high school basketball coaches. And like, he's starting to do what you need to do around the state of Indiana just to build that back up. So I've been very intrigued by that. And I think the team he's built, I've been telling my wife, like, I think you're going to like this team. It's like a lot of guys who are dogs, have chips on their shoulders, a little bit kind of like the Pacers, like a lot of interchangeable parts who are all, 6'7" to 6'8". So thus far, I'm very cautiously optimistic. And the only reason I would say cautiously is just, it's nothing DeVries hasn't done. It's just me having lived through this, unfortunately, for 20 years.
I think the thing I hear from fans, and I'm curious if you kind of share the same sentiment, is you mentioned the plan, but just the opportunity to maybe open up the floor a lot more than what we've seen in the last couple of years in terms of also collecting players who kind of meet certain metrics, from whether it be offensive rebounding percentage or 3-point shooting percentage, rather than just collecting talent without a plan of how the pieces are going to fit together. This seems like more of a measured approach in terms of, hey, we want guys that have taken this number of threes and have hit this percentage because we know we can probably count on that on it once we get this guy on our program. Whereas in the past, again, this is nothing against Mike Woodson. I thought last season they had a lot of talent, but the pieces never really fit together. And I think there's a chance for more success next season, just from the standpoint of I feel like they've actually targeted guys with specific traits and have a way that they at least hope to try to put them together. We have to see it all play out, but it just feels like overall the plan is more organized. Is that fair to say? Do you share that feeling?
I do. No, I agree with that. It's been interesting to me that last offseason, so much of the discussion was about the NIL payments. It's like, man, we're spending this much and we got this guy for that much. And it was about players with kind of the asterisk of like, oh, he's making $2 million. I think I heard $1 million. At least from the people I've been kind of chatting with, it's been more about the players and then their production versus, when you talk about Wilkerson, it's like, man, this guy's a guard who can shoot. And it's like, I haven't heard a lot of talk about the NIL money that we're giving out, which I'm sure we are. I think it's a different mindset of like, we're probably still spending as much or maybe as much as like, but it's more to your point about production and what can this team do. And you got some guys who can shoot threes, which is nice. Like that would be awesome. And again, this was the thing with the Woodson era of basketball is it's not, not everybody has to play the same style of basketball. You don't all have to, 3-and-D and do what everyone else is doing. That said, if you're going to play the way that Woodson was playing, it gives you a very narrow band of being good, and you have to do those things well. And it's like they were not doing the things well that you had to do if you were going to play with two bigs and take a lot of 2-point shots. So I'm excited to see that. I think just having a more freewheeling style of offense would be fun. I mean, that's also, in the end, it's entertainment. Like you want to go and have a good time. And, the Crean teams were fun and they shot a ton and you can get some outlier games. I'm excited. I like what I'm seeing. I think the team, like I said, could be really good, really interesting. What I like that you're starting to see, and we're starting to talk about a little bit on our podcast, is people were a little bit concerned because you basically have, of this class, DeVries went after a lot of juniors and seniors in the transfer portal. So you have 6 seniors and 3 juniors. So it's like, man, this is gonna. And the concern is like, are you gonna have to start flipping this every single year? But what you're seeing is now they're getting very heavily into high school recruiting in the 26 and 27 classes and going after some really interesting names. And it's like, oh yeah, because there's a plan here where it's like, there's going to be playing time for those guys in 26 and 27 because we're going to have, DeVries and Wilkerson are all going to, push off the roster. There's going to be room. And again, it's who cares? I'm sure the other, coaches and Woodson had a plan, but this feels a little more put together. And the last thing I'll say is, I keep going back to, it's like, this guy just did this in West Virginia. Like he just built a team from absolute ground up scratch, did it in West Virginia and got that team on the brink of making the tournament.
Yeah. One thing that I think made fans, something I talked to a little uneasy when he took over, was just the fact that nobody stayed from last year's team. But the more I've thought about that, I think part of the reason that the style of play from Woodson never really evolved is because you had all these players that kept sticking around. It was in the beginning, it was Trace Jackson Davis, and you couldn't, not to say that you wouldn't want to build a team around Trace Jackson Davis, but when he's on your roster, you're not going to be shooting a lot of threes because the ball is going to go inside. Then he had Malik Renew, Khalil Ware, the other front court players. It was like every year that last year was Umar Ballo was built around a front court player. So thinking about that more as the process went on, I thought, sure, it'd be nice to have a couple guys that what they're going to produce coming back, but also being able to kind of build your roster from nothing, assuming you can get the pieces that you want and put it together, really allows you to construct a team in year one that you can actually play your style with. Because let's say Malik Renew would have come back, or 2 or 3 other guys that DeVries maybe not necessarily would have recruited on his own, but if Malik renews on this team next year, things are a lot different.
Right.
So I like the idea of, maybe it's not as talented, but there's the coach is bringing in pieces that he feels like he can put in a position to succeed based on the style of play that he wants to get, rather than trying to fit guys into a system that maybe doesn't work just based on the fact that they were here in the past.
I completely agree. And, it's also kind of like, this is a team that didn't make the tournament for 2 years. Like, it's not like we're bringing back guys from the Final Four team. Just let's be honest. Like,
Right.
some of the, Galloway and Ballo were gone no matter what. So two of the top maybe 4 guys are already not available because they're graduating. It's like you're looking at Renew, Rice, and Mbako. And yeah, maybe in a certain system, 1 or 2 of those guys would be good, but it's like they are holdovers from, a team that was disappointing enough that the coach got resigned or fired, got pushed to resign.
Unclear what exactly happened there.
The coach is different. We'll just put it like the coach is different, and so there's some of that too. And it's a team that the last 2 years you watch them play, and it's not like they were always looked like they were having a great time. Like, it wasn't like amazing chemistry. So there's not a lot of reason to keep those people, and I get it, but it's like it's a different era. And I also think this is where, you just hand over to DeVries. Is like, look, one of the reasons you want to come to IU is we'll give you the ability to just turn it over and go with it. So I'm like you, I wasn't as concerned. I was I knew it would all get figured out. There was like a 2-week period there where I was kind of like, it'd be nice to start getting it figured out. Like, it took a while to get there, but I was never freaking out. Never like, you just got to start signing people to sign people. But it was, like, let's start there was like a 2-week period there. We had his son and that was it, but it all got taken care of, and he got the team that I believe he wants.
Yeah, there was a short period there, and I think I put something on social media like highlighting when Michigan got its commits under the Dusty May era when it started. But there was that period. I think he was hired March 18th, and I think Enright committed April 2nd. But it was like a weekend, and people were starting to groan a little bit. It's like, he said in his press conference, you got to do the vetting on the front end. We got to meet these guys. So I think like in terms of getting commitments, I think they got 10 and 27 days once things got rolling on April 2nd. So it all happened pretty fast once they kind of got everything in place. So overall, the process I thought worked out really well. I'm curious, we've talked about this in the past. You're a season ticket holder. I know you haven't been in Assembly as much as in the past, these past couple of years. Has this rejuvenated your interest in getting back to more games in Bloomington moving forward? Are you going to be more curious to watch this team? You mentioned those Crean teams maybe being a lot more fun to watch. Does the idea of watching maybe a different style of basketball now and having a fresh start make you more anxious, or not more anxious, more excited to get back to games in Bloomington?
It does. Yeah, it does. And it's not a knock on DeVries. It's just, I think any coach every coach, one of the podcasts on the Back Home Network is X's and Joe's, and they talk a lot about, you getting kind of a reset when you hire a new coach. And it's very similar to like an NBA team, maybe tanking and getting a draft pick. You just get a reset. And so part of it is just a new staff. It's like, all right, I'm bought back in. But where DeVries is at, and the more you dig into it, it's like, man, there's a lot that he did to turn around, other programs, what he did at West Virginia, the style that he plays, the kind of the ethos that he brings from Creighton. Hearing stuff like Doug McDermott talking about, man, I love that guy. Like, that's why I went to Creighton, not my dad, which is kind of like, all right, Doug, but it's also like, he said it and it's true. I am very excited. I think seeing these pieces and seeing guys who can shoot and seeing a different style is going to be fun. So part of it is just getting, a new lease on life. Having a younger coach, I think, is interesting. But I'm interested with the team he's building and seeing some of the guys. It does feel like it might just be a chip on the shoulder team and might just have a much different ethos, which I think this could all blend nicely with IU. Here's the question I have for you. I'm going to flip it on you for a second.
Sure.
One of the things I was kind of thought was interesting and I thought was a positive was, IU hiring, or DeVries hiring Kenny Johnson back, who had been under Crean's staff, somebody who you're already seeing some guys in the DMV were giving offers to. Like, you already see fingerprints of him all over the place. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that hire. I mean, I look at that as like, that's something where another coach might have been like, I can't do this. I look at it very much as, this is a coach in DeVries who's like, I see talent, and, all the other pieces doesn't really matter because I see somebody who's really good at their job, and I want somebody who's really good at their job on my staff. And I'm curious what you thought about that hire and if that kind of stuck out to you one way or the other.
I liked it a lot. When Kenny Johnson left Indiana, it was a pretty significant blow to, I think, to Tom Crean in terms of what he was able to do recruiting wise. He did, to his credit, brought in Chuck Martin, who helped him get Thomas Bryant, and talent wasn't really an issue of the Crean era, but Kenny Johnson did a phenomenal job the first go around. And, obviously there was some question marks, I think, from some in the fan base, just, obviously what happened at Louisville, but all that stuff, water under the bridge in terms of his problems with the NCAA. I know Kenny Johnson a little bit. He's always been a really personable, nice guy. I think he's one of the better recruiters in terms of just building connections and getting to know kids of any coach in the country. And the fact that they brought him in, along with the other guys they brought in, Rod Clark, I think, is a very good hire, getting him away from Tennessee. Drew Adams, obviously very familiar with the state of Indiana with his ties to the Indiana Elite program. I think that it just, we fall into this trap, we fell in this trap, I think, the last two times of when Archie was hired. Always got this great coaching staff, and these guys are great. Same thing, I think, with Mike Woodson. So I never want to say this is going to work out 100%. These guys are going to crush it, but all of them have credentials. They've recruited high-level players. Obviously, we've seen Kenny Johnson do it in Indiana. We saw him at Louisville recruit Donovan Mitchell. We saw him now kind of rehab his career working at Rhode Island, and then last season at Georgetown. So I think it's good, and I think it's a hire that I don't think we would have seen at Indiana maybe 5 or 10 years ago, right? I think that speaks to the idea of just getting out of the way and letting the coach do his job. If Darian DeVries is going to succeed in Indiana, he's got to have administrative support. He's got to be allowed to do his job as he sees fit. As long as these guys don't have anything in terms of NCAA rules that are prohibiting them from doing their job now, which none of them do. As I said, whatever happened with Kenny Johnson is now water under the bridge. He's cleared from an NCAA perspective. Let the coach assemble the staff that he wants, give him the resources that he wants, and we'll see how it works. So I think overall, it's a really solid staff. We'll see how it works out. I like the approach so far. They seem to be targeting guys that Clark and Adams and Johnson had already maybe built a connection with at their previous stops, so they kind of have built-in relationships there. It's never great to be starting from scratch this late in the process, and so we'll see how it works out. I still question long-term how important high school recruiting is with the portal out there. I don't know how big. Obviously, you want to get talented high school players and bring them in, but at the same volume as what you did in the past, I don't think that's going to be the case, because if I can go out there and get a ready-made guy from the portal that can come in and give me instant production, do I want to have a high school recruiting class of 5 or 6 guys every year? I don't think I do. So I like the idea of bringing in 2, 3, maybe 4 really good players that fit the system. But I think the days are over of having these, 5 or 6 men recruiting class that we saw maybe 10, 15 years ago.
I know, I agree with that, but I do think it needs to be a mixture. And I think that's why I like seeing DeVries get some of these recruiting only guys on his staff, because, that's what you were seeing under Woodson that I thought was a little bit wrong. I think it's wrong on either side of universities that are programs that are going hard one way or the other. Like when you see, Clemson football, when he's like, I'm not doing any transfers. It's like, all right, well, I don't think that's the right way to go about it. But it felt like with Woodson, it was like, well, we don't really care about recruiting. It's like, well, I don't think that's the right way either. You need to have a mixture. I'm not saying you were saying that, but I do think it's important that, it's going to be a blend where you need to have 2 or 3 or 4 guys that you're recruiting that come in every year. And then also, get guys that you can get on transfer. But I also think what's important is, just because guys you get in the portal doesn't mean, I do think this is a longer tail. And I think might be what Woodson was missing some of, is he just didn't seem to, from everything I heard, care much about high school recruiting. I was like, we'll just get it in the portal. Well, kids in the portal, guess where they started? They were high school recruits. And so,
Right.
The idea that you don't, I do think a lot of this is like, hey, we're going to build a relationship now, and maybe we'll offer you, maybe you don't come, maybe we don't offer you, but it's like, we're going to build that relationship. And then maybe you go to Iowa State for a year and it's like, you don't like it. And it's like, hey, now I'm not just coming and calling after you had a good year at Iowa State. It's like, we have this long-term relationship. And you see this a lot in the portal, is that guys go places in the portal where it's like, oh yeah, he was actually recruited by that assistant coach 4 years ago. And so I would think, to me, it's like a little bit more subtle than just we're trying to get high school recruits. I think you're trying to build as many relationships with as many players as you can. And so I look at that as a real positive.
Yeah, maybe I misphrased it in terms of
I wasn't saying
saying,
towards you.
no, just in general of the high school recruiting. I'm just saying in general, I think what you said, the sweet spot is probably in the middle, right?
Yeah.
You land a couple of, if you can get, we could probably have a longer conversation about this, but if you can get elite high school kids to come that are one and done, 2-year player, of course you take those guys. I think the problem is more of the guy who maybe isn't as highly ranked and isn't going to see the court maybe immediately. You have to be able to convince them that there's a 2 or 3 year plan and get them to stay, because you don't want to recruit a guy who's on campus for a year and never gets to play and then just leaves the portal. You've gained nothing by that. So I think you want to get guys who either can come in and make an instant impact, or they buy your long-term plan for development, and then sprinkle in some portal guys. I do think they did a pretty nice job, because early on I was like, wow, they're getting all these guys from the portal that are all seniors and not going to have any eligibility.
Right.
Towards the end, they did, to their credit, identify some younger players that either have a year or 2 eligibility left, so they're going to have some continuity if they can keep those play. And again, this is all just a 1-year plan, right? Every year, college basketball is a 1-year plan. I mean, who knows? Some of these guys could come in and knock it out of the park and stay multiple years, and others could say, well, maybe I didn't play as much, I'm going to go somewhere else. So that's the other thing. It's all up in the air on a year-to-year basis. Last thing I wanted to ask you about, though, is we've been seeing these teasers on social media from IU athletics, and Galen has been banging the drum to bring back the Bison for a long time on CrimsonCast. What has been your reaction to these teases on social media? I mean, obviously nobody's confirmed what this is, but I mean, it definitely seems like something tied to that, or a mascot. What is your stance on bringing back the Bison, and how excited would your good friend Galen be if the Bison is indeed returning to Bloomington?
I mean, I love the idea of IU just gaslighting Galen. Like, just, we're going to put a media strategy this summer to gaslight a podcaster to get him. But no, Galen's been ending our podcast for the last 5 or 6 years, bring back the Bison. It's something where it was a mascot for, as close to a mascot as IU has had outside of when I was in college and we had the big inflatable guys walking around the football stadium, which didn't make a lot of sense, but neither did having a black uniform with an oval logo. Galen would be over the moon. He would be on top of things. It all kind of started with our I don't say it all started, but Home Field Apparel, one of their first big hits was a sweatshirt that had the Bison, the old Bison logo on it. And IU got, IU wearing a Bison, Knicks has the Bison in their logo. It goes way back. I'm not even sure you need to have like a Bison. You don't need to have a dress up character. I think the idea of integrating it more with the university is a cool thing. It gives you more looks. It gives you more ability to have different looks of your uniforms and just different alternatives. And, I think it started in kind of jest with Galen kind of messing around, but, yeah, I think it would be awesome.
So you don't want a live Bison leading the team out of the tunnel?
I think that would be
incredible.
Not saying no, but it's a little bit like Colorado's already got that. Like, I think you got to be careful you're not diving too deep too early. Like, you haven't had a mascot for 100 years and you're just going to have a live Bison on the field.
No, I think it's awesome though to have a mascot, right? I mean, I think of like,
I agree,
college football programs watching these rivalry games on TV. They all have mascots. It just like feels like part of the sport, and Indiana hadn't had that for so long. So I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, what's the connection with the Bison in Indiana? And they're just doing this to, be different or whatever. But it's like, all right, it's Indiana football too, right? They need to continue to find ways to differentiate themselves and be different and be bold. I like the idea. I mean, they got some momentum behind the program, obviously, right now with what happened last year. They got a ton of talent coming back. They did well in the transfer portal. People are looking forward to another season where they could compete in the Big Ten. Why not do something like this?
I agree. I'll recant. A live bison would be awesome on the field. I'm in. But I mean, they've been kind of tinkering with this for a while. You know, under Kevin Wilson, one of the intro videos for football had bison running across the state of Indiana, all toward Memorial Stadium. So and again, like that's what I would say to anybody who's like, "Where's this coming from?" Like bison has been part of IU for years. Like there were bison mascots in Memorial Stadium in like the 40s, 50s, or 60s, somewhere in,
60s,
yeah, way back when. I also, it is another little dig in my mind at Purdue, which I love because it's like it's part of the Indiana state flag, and it's just kind of hammers home like, yeah, we're the University of Indiana. Like we're the University of Indiana, of the state of Indiana. We have the state flag, we have that bison, that's all ours. No, I think it would be awesome. It would be really cool if they announced that. I would also love to see a helmet with the bison logo on it. That would be really cool. And I would say same thing with the basketball jerseys. Like, let's get a jersey that has a bison on, the shorts on the side. I'm all for kind of changing things up a little bit as well.
I mean, if Adidas can get it together and produce apparel too, I mean, think of how much revenue they could generate just for the university from that, because people will buy that stuff. Kids love mascots, I'm sure my kids are a little bit older now, but I'm sure little kids would love something like that. And I think it's just I think it's a smart thing to do. So hopefully, again, we're just speculating here. We have no idea what these teasers are, but they're coming out pretty well done. Jeremy Gray with some great acting chops on a couple of those. So
and then you can have a bison
fun to see
flag.
that.
One of the rally towels at the stadium could be the bison. No, it gives you a whole nother layer of things to use, and it feels like Indiana marketing is starting to, I don't want to say wake up, because they've always been around, but it's like they're really jumping on the opportunity they have with what football has been doing.
Well, you have to, right? Because in this era of revenue sharing, you gotta bring in whatever you can, right? Bring in every dollar. Every dollar matters. So you want to be competitive. Do what you can. Well, Scott, enjoy your sports weekend. I know it's going to be a lot of fun. Holiday weekend.
Let me try and end on one last thing. I want to end on a positive, and this is a very positive note, but it is something I have thought about at a high level for basketball. Let's assume that the DeVries era goes really well. And so in 2 or 3 years, we're at a point where I'm not going to be talking Final Fours and titles, because we got to get there first. Let's just say this hire works, and we're at a point where we're really happy. What I do think is really cool is that we are in that window. You look back on the Crean era, once it started humming, like once you had the Oladipo, the Zeller, the Hulls team, that was awesome. But because that turned out to be awesome, I think we all look back in retrospect and really have a positive remembrance of like Tom Pritchard and Matt Roth, and like that whole era, that 2 or 3 year window where you were building it. And, if you end up building it and it turns into nothing, it's not a ton of fun. But if you build it and then all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, we're beating Kentucky and we're going to a Final Four. And it's like Verdell Jones, or not Final Four, but, we're the number one team in the country and we're the number one seed in the tournament. It helps kind of remember back the Verdell Jones era a little bit better. And so I do think we're at that point right now where this team, next year's team, you could be at a point where this becomes a really beloved team if things end up turning out right. And it's a fun journey that you really can't replicate. And we talked about IU football. Everyone should show up. Like, everyone shows up, come to the games, please. It's going to be hard to replicate last year, because last year you can't go up the mountain 2 different times. You can still go, and we still have places we haven't gone in IU football, but it's like, it's now there's a little more expectation. So anyway, that's what I've been thinking about, is that I do think that's what's on the table here, is you could have some of the most beloved teams we've had in a while in IU basketball in the next 2 years, even if they don't accomplish things that we think are, at that level in IU basketball.
Yeah, but the thing you got to remember too is what Kurt Signet did with IU football last year has given fans belief that things can happen quickly. And I think that's another reason
we shouldn't get over our skis on that. Like, I think that's something where, so if IU doesn't make the Sweet 16, it's not like it's a failure. Like, to me,
yeah. But I think it's also just giving people a new perspective, just to say that, it doesn't have to be a 2 or 3 year struggle.
Right.
You look at Louisville with Pat Kelsey, look at Kentucky with Mark Pope. I mean, obviously Louisville just got back into the tournament, and 2 years before they were historically bad. And Kentucky, obviously, they were a lot of fun to watch last year, made it to the Sweet 16. So I think, and again, this is another conversation we can have in the fall once we know more about all the rosters and once we were closer to the season. But I think if he can just come out next season and play a fun, exciting brand of basketball to watch and get into the tournament, I think that's really going to be a great jump start for this era of IU basketball.
Yeah, I mean, it's not maybe asking too much. You look at Kentucky last year; it's like they go 21-10, 10-8 in the SEC, make it the Sweet 16. It's like done. I'll take that. Like that would be an unbelievable season. And what I'm excited about too is don't forget we're playing Kentucky next year. It's like all of a sudden, like it's like wow, that series starts immediately, and I'm excited. I'm gonna try and go to Rupp for that game. I think there's a lot of little touch points early in the year where you could really jazz this fan base up at a very high degree.
For sure. Well, Scott, enjoy your weekend in Indianapolis.
Thank you, man. Racers, Pacers, let's go.
Enjoy your Monday off. I hope everyone has a great Memorial Day weekend. And thanks, everybody, as always, for listening to Podcasts on the Brink. If you enjoy the show, please leave us 5-star rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating over on Spotify. We'd really appreciate it. And we'll be back soon with another episode of Podcast on the Brink.